So with Netflix having made some really solid animated movies recently, I got excited for this one, except that turns out this is actually produced by Sony. But I mean, it still looked good, so does it really matter who made it if it's high quality? Not really, and I would say that this is definitely a high quality animated film. In fact, I loved the art style and the animation, it was pretty creative actually. Blending together a few different styles and even incorporating some limited stuff from the real world. And usually I'm not a fan of mixing styles, but in this one I have to say it worked. So far so good, and I like the general premise here as well, it felt unique. Because as the title might suggest, we follow this dysfunctional family, as they basically attempt to navigate the robot apocalypse. Not exactly an idea I've seen explored before. But the core of the story is of course not about the robots taking over the world at all. It's about this family and their internal struggles and conflicts and their attempts to work those issues out. Now don't get me wrong, the plot most definitely does involve the machine uprising quite heavily. It's sort of what drives everything forward on the surface, but deep down that's just not what the story is about. And I liked the general story here too, I liked how it brought everything together in the end as well. And overall I thought it worked well enough, and I also liked a fair amount of the humor here. I mean, a lot of it didn't quite do it for me, but a lot of it did at least make me smirk. And that's the thing with a movie like this, it just throws so much at you constantly that some of it's bound to hit. And some of it definitely does. Now, one of the running gags I was a bit skeptical about, involving the dog, which initially I have to admit I found to be pretty funny. But it did start to wear a bit thin at some point. However, then the movie did something pretty clever. It justified all of that by incorporating the dog into the plot in a way I did not see coming. And it won me back over, and it was one of the most creative uses of a silly side character I've ever seen. Oh, and speaking of funny stuff, there's a sequence in a shopping mall, which involves a rather large entity, and I don't know why, but I thought it was hilarious. There was just something about the randomness of the whole idea, and then they figured out a way to make it even more absurd by handling it in a certain way, so that was great too. And so far I've been focusing on the positives, and there are quite a number of good things about this, for sure. Unfortunately, there were a number of issues I had with this as well. Because first of all, I would very much describe this as hectic and perhaps even a little bit over-energetic. For me personally, it was all just a little bit too much with the constant barrage of stuff coming at you. And considering this actually pokes fun at and attempts to comment on technology and social media, etc., it feels like it was made for the ADHD generation that has the attention span of a kitten on catnip. There's just so much going on at all times, and it's almost as if it's afraid to slow down every now and again. Like it thinks the audience will get bored and turn it off if it's not throwing things at you every 10 milliseconds. Which then brings me to my other big issue, and it's kind of hilarious considering my previous point, because this felt way longer than it was, and maybe that was partially because of the amount of stuff constantly coming at you. But I do think it also had some issues with the general structure and flow of the story. Because there was a point about an hour in where it felt like it was coming to an end. Like it was wrapping things up, and it just felt like a very natural point to start bringing it all together. But then it obviously didn't and just kept going, and yeah, I think they should have looked at the pacing a bit more closely. Because as I said, this is a high quality production and I did like a fair number of things about it. But the hectic and relentless nature of it combined with the pacing issues did bring down my enjoyment a notch or two. So all things considered, I think I'm gonna have to give this one a solid 6. Boop. However, would I recommend it? If you like these types of animated movies, sure, why not? And if you don't, then you can probably skip it, or do whatever you feel like. After all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel, because that would be fantastic.